Okay, so this is the quick go live. Hello, everyone. And we're going to wait 2 seconds for a beat for Instagram to go live. Hopefully, okay, it's going live on my end. I'm pressing.
Oh, yes. Wait,
So you
hold
just
on.
press the go live key when it turns blue. Got it?
I did. I touched it. Ah! I think we're doing it.
I am Vivi Henriette, and you are Marval Rex, and we are here today to talk about all the things. Um, how are you?
I have had a really interesting sleep schedule. So I have Jupiter in my 12th house of sleep, which has been an absolute journey. And this holiday, it's like my schedule has been pushed back. Plus, we watched Kate Blanchett's Disclaimer late last night, which is amazing, but also intense. And speaking of Gemini, I'm seeing the Jupiter and Gemini themes in everything I'm watching right now. But I usually get up earlier than this, but you're catching me like up from 9 a.m. So I'm a little sleepy, but I'm doing good. Happy to be here.
Wow. Okay, this
Yeah.
does seem like you slept in.
I did. I slept in. Oh my God. This is, yeah, absolutely. But it's also holiday time, so it's a little bit of sleep in.
Then no, that's really
Um,
nice. I'm a crazy person and I set my alarm for 5 a.m. because I was like, I have things to do.
Good for you. I mean, no, that's amazing. I mean, I sometimes do that.
Yeah,
I do that at least once or twice a week where I'm like, I'm getting up before everyone else. And it is an amazing feeling to be
it
that
is.
productive. It's
But
true.
but who does that on the Friday after Thanksgiving? That just makes me a crazy person.
I know. Yeah. Well, it's all right. Yeah, I like it. We're doing this. This is like one of my favorite things to be doing. I'm not a huge like American holiday person. So like astrology is exciting to me. I'm like, this is a great way to spend Black Friday. Yes.
Oh my God, absolutely. And speaking of, we should start. I did make some notes. I know you have things you want to
Yes.
talk about, but just
Yes.
for the sake of my brain being a chaotic mess.
Great. Love it. Jupiter
Um,
Gemini. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah. I thought we talk about, well, we can't not talk about this Mercury retrograde. There's a new moon tomorrow, which just to me feels just like chaos.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of it feels very trickster chaos because we have Mercury and Jupiter as part
Yep.
of this lunation.
Yep. Well, yes. Wow. Yes. Wow. Yes. I would say to anyone listening that the next 2 weeks off of this lunation, tomorrow we have this
Yep.
lunation. The next 2 weeks, please suspend your conclusions, suspend your belief or disbelief, or both. Your disbelief may become your belief, and vice versa, over the next 2 weeks. I would also, to add a layer to the cake, Mars is essentially stationed in the sky. So it's like he's not fully still, but the slower moving they get, the more they kind of grind. So we just have this, in a way, the retrograde pileup is really asking all of us, at least in the northern hemisphere, it's winter, so it's very internal, but it's asking us all to do like deep like retrofitting of the way that we think, the way that we do things, the way that we philosophize. Like it's really deep. It's not easy.
Oh God, no. Okay, I have a really good story for you that I think really
Mhm.
summarizes this Mercury retrograde and the conversation with stationing Mars.
Great.
So I'm working on a project right now that it's a big organizational project. Um,
Mercury.
and actually sneak peek, I won't get into the details of this, but it's an astrology, it's a Los Angeles Astrology Festival that you're going to be speaking at. I can say that. And
Yay.
so I'm doing logistics for this, and there's a bunch of moving parts and a bunch of different people involved, and everyone's wonderful. But right, when you're working on things like this, sometimes there's moments where there's misunderstandings, and
Of course.
you're okay. So it was this week where it was one of those trying to figure out this particular moving part. And I have Sun and Mars and Aries. So as you can tell, I'm quick to anger. I'm also quick to be confused with my natal Mercury and Pisces.
Yeah.
So,
Sure. Yes.
we hit a
Yes.
bump in the road and I'm like, oh, I'm getting angry at this person. But I was smart enough, knowing, granted, it's not their fault. There was just one of those no one's understanding each other. But I was smart enough to get a handler. My other collaborator, I was like, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to send all emails to you. you're going to rewrite them, edit them before I sent anything out. And
Right. So
because
good.
I did that, we were able to smoothly navigate the situation. So even though there was confusion, misunderstanding, there was anger, I was able to find a check to clear it all.
This is so
So
good.
proud of myself.
I want to say like that allegory is so helpful to folks listening if you're in a situation of overwhelm. I think it's like Gemini's so good. It's like you literally doubled. It's like a ghostwriter. You had like a ghostwriter for your emails. I mean, the opposite. You had an editor for your emails, but it's this doubling of like two people. It's like you think it's from Vivi, but it's actually Vivi after the edit of the friend, which is very doubled in Gemini. I would say check everything twice for sure. And yeah, give yourself safeguards. I mean, Mars is in your first house, so that makes sense that like there could be any Cancer rising or Leo rising is going to maybe feel quick to anger at this moment, right? Or any Cancers and Leos in your life in general, anyone listening, like those two are really sensitive right now. I'm working with a lot of Cancer and Leo rising clients. And so I'm just like navigating their relationship to anger and sacred anger and how to use it constructively rather than destructively. I think this retrograde Mercury and the new moon in Sag can give a little fuel to the fire for the destructive side of it. So we have to be really careful. Where does pride come in? I keep thinking like, where does pride come in? And I want to reflect for you based on your story, like not that you need me to be proud of you, but there's an element where I'm like, oh, I'm so glad that you're pushing, but like I think it's good to be pushing your comfort zones right now. I mean, particularly Cancer and Leos, but like
Yeah.
pushing your comfort zone when it comes to like building the new future that you want. We just have to move slowly when you're pushing, because you're pushing out of your comfort zone technologically with emails and organizing.
Uh-huh.
It's all good. It's just like we have to have checks and balances and go slow, especially this winter on the northern hemisphere. Yeah, we have to go slow this winter.
Oh God. It's funny. At one point, I will say there was a point where I was like, I don't even like, I'm so overwhelmed. I'm so angry. I know this person I shouldn't be angry with. Can you literally just like I was transcribing on the phone with my handler. I was like, okay, I'm gonna tell you this.
So
Can
good.
you like put this into like normal, healthy speech? Which they did perfectly. And they were also like, so that this entire planning process is bookend by the Mars Pluto opposition. So I'm just because they're also an astrologer, I'm just
Of
expecting
course.
some aggression to be part of this process.
It's
And I was like,
baked in.
it's baked in. Bless
It's
you.
baked in. It's so helpful. I want to say, like, having astrology at this time, especially as we head into Pluto and Aquarius, it actually feels like a superpower.
Yeah.
It actually feels like I mean, it is witchcraft. It is really magic if you're using it that way. Um, I feel so grateful to have the framework so that I just don't get pulled so deeply into the telenovela of like wanting to be mad at somebody and wanting to have this whole, I'm like looking at it, I'm like, I have a lot of Cancer risings in my life, and I'm like, oh, there's the Mars Pluto opposition since Halloween. Like, okay. Like, I'm like, okay, I got it. I see it. Um, so helpful to develop compassion for others and yourself. Like you have compassion for yourself, and your handler was like, here's compassion for everybody since we have a volatile Mars Pluto opposition baked into this process. I would say for anybody listening, whatever's been going on in your life since October 6th all the way till April 25th of 2025. Like that's the
Yeah.
whole, right? Isn't that the whole journey? We get that last opposition right around late April, I think. Yeah. So we're deep in this process. If anyone's had any big tete moments, they're going to continue and transfigure. I'm like, oh, this is medicine. I love Mars Pluto shifting signs together, figuring out how to heal our inner child. I think it's so interesting because the way that we handle conflict often is sort of based on the imprint of how our guardians handled conflict in front of us as children, or how they didn't. Most of our
Yeah.
guardians didn't handle conflict. So we're sort of collectively, all of us are being asked to grow up in a really deep way. Every time I see a Leo transit, especially in contact with Aquarius, it's like, oh, time to be more of a citizen of the world by growing up and taking care of our our own history and our own baggage, and then being able to step into a collective space, which is exactly what you're doing, Vivi, with with this festival. It's like I'm stepping out, like I'm building with other people, and all these emotional things are coming up, which is Leo. It's like all these like things of like, you know.
Totally. I think of the Mars in Leo is that like child that like really wants to be seen, but they don't know how to get attention, so they're just throwing a temper tantrum. Meanwhile,
Yes.
like Pluto and Aquarius is like, I'm gonna bring up all the matter for you to deal with. And but it's like, oh, the only way through this is through like the intellect, through that the quality of air of
Yeah.
like, how can we talk it out and make a plan?
Yeah. Yes, and I would say for everyone listening, like this is the one of the strongest aspects we're dealing with over the next 5 months, I would say.
Yeah.
And it's an undercurrent, and actually I think it was Stephen Green and Rick Levine were talking about how with Pluto especially, we have these peaks, we have these crests, which was Halloween. We had an opposition right around Halloween, so you might want to think what was happening that period. And then we're going to have one on January, isn't it like January, the first week of January? We're having our second opposition, I think,
I
is the
think so.
first
I
week.
think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's like January 6th or January 7th. Maybe it's not, because January 6th is when Mars moves back into Cancer, I think.
I can just tell you in 2 seconds. Keep talking. I'll look this
Yeah,
up.
and then the third opposition happens late April. So we have these three big peaks of like, oh, this is the obvious power struggle. This is where my inner child is being asked to do some deep healing. But otherwise, Stephen Green and Rick Levine were talking about between those periods, between Halloween, between New Year's, and between late April, it just is kind of glacial the way that Pluto can work. It's like glacial, like it moves slowly. Pluto's work is slow and it's daily. And it's like, oh, there's that little hint of the power dynamic. There's that little hint of me being triggered. Oh, I'm getting more intimate with my core wound. I'm getting more intimate with like inner child wounding. That reminds me of a parent dynamic. This is all Pluto Mars right now. That's they're functioning in these parent child signs. And they're trying, and I'm going to say something really intense, but it's Pluto. They're trying to kill off. And Pluto's really trying to kill off behavior patterns and nervous system patterns and child memories that no longer serve us or need to be rewritten. And actually, what a better time than this Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, the storyteller. What a better time this winter, this December, to rewrite our stories. That's like a big thing I've been telling on my podcast is like, what are the stories you're telling yourself, especially that inform your emotional response to things? And how historical are they? Yeah.
Ooh, I love that so much. And touching on two things. First, the dates. You are correct. The next opposition is January 2nd, and then the last one's April 26th. So
Great. Good to
January,
know.
April.
I would pay attention to New Year's. Yeah, for folks. New Year's is going to be big. Yeah.
It's really, the astrology is happening on all the cute holidays this year.
Yeah.
Um,
I have a really funny story about
yeah.
January 2nd. No. You go first and then I'll share my anecdote about how intense astrology is. Anyway,
Oh,
go ahead.
please. I was gonna say too, it's we forget in a way that the outer planet transits are nice in the sense, as you said, it's a daily work. So like there is, because they're slow enough, there's an opportunity to participate in the story.
Yes.
And I think it was Diana Rose Harper at the last Astro Salon. I think it was Diana who said, you can either walk along or get dragged along. And I'm like, oh God, that's so perfect for this transit.
It is. Thank you for saying that, because I'll just piggyback off that and say,
Yeah.
if folks take some time, again, I'm talking a lot to the Northern Hemisphere folks right now, but if people take time this winter to sit with uncomfortable feelings as they arise and interrogate them. The beauty of Jupiter and Gemini is you can turn things like a jewel. It's parallaxical, which is a very Jupiter and Gemini word. Parallaxical is to look at everything from every angle. And if you have an emotion come up, what is it like to be curious? That's my favorite Gemini word. What is it like to be curious about the history of the emotion or the emotional response, knowing that we actually have a lot more power to change our nervous system through daily behavior. That's the Pluto work. It's like glacial Saturn work is daily behavior in Pisces, mental health. Like, come on. So yeah, I think that it's a really great time. If I was to give like pocket, like blanket blanket advice. Wow, I lost that. Whatever.
That works.
Yeah. Anyway, blanket statement advice. I would say be really emotionally curious with yourself and with others this winter. I would journal because Gemini and Sagittarius, like anything to do with the pen, anything to do with
Mhm.
writing, texting, typing out your emotions. There can be incredible downloads, especially the next 2 weeks after this new moon. Just like huge.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that what you said about, and I like, rewriting your story is the theme for this Mercury retrograde, which is so true, right? Because what are Mercury retrogrades? I mean, besides just being blanket chaos, it is Mercury's moment of disappearing, right?
Yep.
From being an evening star, going
Yep.
invisible, and returning as a morning star, right? So we get this new
Yep.
start baked into the Mercury retrograde as we get the new star baked into the new moon. And like in my case, for example, I am rewriting my story. I am no longer someone who just fires off angry emails without
Yes.
understanding the full story. I am now somebody
So
who
good.
pauses, asks for help, and moderates a situation. That's my new
Yep.
story.
Yeah, and this is amazing. This dovetails beautifully into my Mars Pluto opposition. I booked a role on a movie right around October, so like right around this first Cancer Capricorn. Booked the movie, great. The movie shoots, or I fly in on January 2nd, which now you just said January 2nd is the Mars Pluto yeah, of course I fly in to shoot the movie. In the movie, I get killed. My character, I can't say much else, but my
Yeah,
character gets killed about halfway through the movie. And it's very interesting because it's very Mars Pluto. Like my character gets killed because my character is literally kind of a toxic male. It's very the shadow of like Mars and Leo. It's so prideful and he's so unhinged. My character is so unhinged. But it's interesting because through getting into into that character, I'm getting into someone else's world and I'm building a character. Through doing that, I'm able to interrogate my own inherited toxic masculinity. I'm able to interrogate how I'm also able to interrogate. This is very Pluto and Aquarius. I have an Aquarius stellium. I'm able to interrogate like how men have been conditioned because this is a super toxic male. So I'm also doing this deep dive. It's both. I'm like I'm checking myself, but I'm also thinking more compassionately and emotionally about men because I'm having to get into this role and I get to play out the Mars Pluto violence, but it's fake instead of real. Do you see what I'm saying? Like I get to go.
absolutely.
It's kind of amazing. Like that's the rewriting for me is that instead of me having a deep emotional arc that I'm internalizing and owning, I get to do the Leo thing, which is perform it and alchemize it through the performing rather than the internal. Because before it's like I also have a temper. I don't know if you have a temper, but I don't want to say that you have the same temper as me, but like I have a temper. Um, oh yeah, absolutely. And the acting has been this process of not just rewriting my own life because every character changes you, but I get to funnel the aggression into a make believe situation that actually has extremely low stakes. You know, it's really nice for me, you know?
So we were talking a little bit about survival tips for this season. And for those people who aren't actors,
Yeah.
which is myself and lots of other people, you bring up this idea of maybe like astro drama, right? So even though not everybody is going to be cast in a movie role as a super toxic male and getting to act it out in this way, this could be a good opportunity to do some role play with your astro friends and like,
Yes.
or write it out. Like there's so many ways you can actually like play this out
Yes.
without like a sort of cathartic moment outside of yourself.
I love that. Thank you. I would say Mars and Leo, which, shifts January 6th, which oof, that date. But like Mars and Leo, it goes back into Cancer, and that's going to be a whole other conversation. But right now, here we are, Mars and Leo. I would say for folks who have any kind of movement-based practice, even if you don't have a movement-based
Yeah.
practice, what is it like? I did this a couple of years ago, and it was so much fun. Whether you have astrology knowledge or not, but if you have astrology knowledge, what does it feel like to move? Like, what is your interpretation of moving like Mars and Leo versus Mars and Cancer? Those are two totally different movements. They could be. movement-based work that's just like intuitive and imaginative. You could do it in your bedroom. Like you don't have to do this publicly.
Yeah.
I think like movement-based work, also letting yourself like finding containers where you can feel anger, I think would be extremely helpful during this time. Anger is so healthy when it is intentionally felt in a container that either you create or you co-create with a person you trust or a professional. Like it is
Mhm.
so helpful. One thing that I do that I can offer to people, that you can do in private, is you can do kind of a form of gestalt where you sit in it's called the black chair. I call it the black chair, but you sit in on Black Friday. You sit in a chair and then you sit opposite an empty chair. It also could be called empty chair. You sit opposite an empty chair. You can do this totally privately, and actually, I would only recommend doing this privately or with a professional. Although you go off Mars and Leo, but you sit across from an empty chair and you imagine a person sitting in that chair that you need to say things to that are like emotionally charged, and really go there and then start talking to the person. I mean, I have a Jupiter Mercury opposition, so I'm very good at this. But you start talking to the person and you just like let the things come out, and it's really emotional. I mean, it's very cathartic to say things to an imaginary person. Folks might be listening and being like, "Oh, that sounds weird." It Your brain doesn't quite know the difference. There's an
Yeah.
interesting trick you can play with yourself where your brain is like, "Oh no, I am." The imagination is very powerful. It's witchcraft, basically. Our imagination is witchcraft. So,
Yeah.
like, you can really call in and evoke a person. I've talked to people who've passed away. Like, I've had deep conversations that have been deeply emotionally cathartic for me and also have helped me rewrite stuck patterning around that person, which is very Mars Pluto, I think. It's like, oh, I'm going to transfigure a place where I've felt disempowered, Mars
Mm.
retrograde. Disempowered, Mars retrograde. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I mean, oftentimes, yeah, like when we are getting something off of our chest, it's not even about the other person anyway, right? It's like
Not at all.
they could just be staring at you or say something really mean. It doesn't matter, but you're like, oh, like I just got that off my chest and I feel really good, which is essentially what you're doing.
Yeah. I thought it was like I did it within a clinical setting
Yeah.
like years ago, and it was so helpful. It was so helpful because you can say things that you can't say to the person in real life, and also
Uh-huh.
we shouldn't. Like the danger of this Mars cycle, from my perspective on an unconscious level, is that people are going to throw the baby out with the bathwater in a lot of their relationships. And what I mean by that is you get triggered. It's a deep core childhood wound. Maybe it's several childhood wounds compounded, and you're like, oh my God, I feel so disempowered. I feel so triggered. I want to eradicate this person from my life or eradicate this dynamic entirely from my life instead of working with it. And I loved your anecdote because you're like, I'm going to call on a friend, Aquarius,
Yeah.
and I'm going to work with my emotions in a different way, Gemini. And I don't have to beat myself up. I think if people throw the baby out with the bathwater in their relationships or in their networking, etc., they don't get the opportunity, which there's a beautiful opportunity right now to actually have more self-confidence. Like you didn't self-defeat. You didn't send the email that was going to make you feel bad later, right? You were
Mhm.
like, never mind, I'm not doing that. I'm calling on a friend, and now I'm really proud of myself, and I'm sharing it on this. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's look, I love what you said about Mars and Leo is the kid on the playground who retrograde doesn't know
Mhm.
how to get the attention that it needs, so it gets negative attention, which is so the unconscious shadow of this aspect is negative attention. I've been seeing a lot of people doing this. I've been already in the shadow, just in Mars's
Uh-huh.
shadow. I've seen a lot of negative attention. And my first thought is, oh my gosh, their inner child is hurting. Okay, they need stuff. They don't know how to articulate. They don't have the emotional tools yet to articulate this emotional need from a place of expansive attention or engendering conversations rather than negative attention, which is shutting them down. But it's okay. This is the arc. I'm very compassionate with people. This is the arc of this Mars Pluto cycle. They by April, hopefully, my hope is that people are like, oh, that negative attention style isn't working. I need to figure out what is hurting within me and will allow me to. What can I change that will allow me to have deeper relationships and intimacy with people and with groups? Right.
You know what it is, and I've also like sort of experienced this in my life as well and around me. going back to the playground analogy, it's the kid who like really wants a hug. So I don't want to gender this child. They start like hitting people because they're like so lonely, but they don't know that like people don't hug you back when you hit them.
Yes.
like that's the
It's the bully archetype actually in most like movies. I think of like Sandlot, and there's so many, the Goonies, like there's so many 80s and 90s movies with these like, and I reference those because you've got Mars and Leo is kind of like a boy, like a boy that needs a lot of love and is very sensitive, but instead of being, especially retrograde Mars Leo, is like instead of being their sensitive, deep feeling self, this is the character I'm playing in this movie, they're just an asshole. And like, it's kind of amazing. I read this role and I was like, oh, I love being an astrologer and an actor because I'm like, oh, Mars and Leo, Mars and Cancer. Cool. Pluto's going to kill me. Exciting. Like it's really fun to work with the archetypes and build the characters that way. But yes, Mars and Leo needs a lot of love. And instead of retrograde, instead of knowing how to get it, it's kind of like he's cutting their nose off to spite their own face, so we want to watch out for that basically in our own lives. And then if people have folks in their lives that are acting like Mars and Leo, or are being a bully, or wanting negative attention, my advice, to be completely honest, it's a fine line, but like I tend to ask questions instead of the shadow of Pluto and Aquarius to me is like, oh, you don't fit into the group, you're out. Like you're out of the group. You don't fit. You are, or here's an even deeper, I think. Like someone in front of you in your life is doing the Mars and Leo negative attention, bullying, maybe having emotional leakage, lots of messy stuff. The shadow of Pluto and Aquarius is, I'm going to only approach this person with my mind. So instead of having compassion, it's just kind of cold, disaffected. I'm putting you, like, it's very paternal. It can be that shadow paternal, a little bit like Capricorn, these Saturn ruled signs. Just like, I'm okay, you're in a box now. I've categorized you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not going to approach you with my heart, right? Aquarius can lack compassion. What I've been practicing with the Mars and Leo people in my life is, and by that I just mean archetypally they are Mars and Leo right now. I've been asking like compassionate questions out of total curiosity, like actual genuine curiosity. So not like, let me ask leading questions to get, no, it's like, I'm really curious, like, okay, what is that process? Because then what it does is it forces people to reflect, whether they want to, maybe not in front of you, but they will leave the conversation later and be like, oh, that person didn't get defensive. It's disarming. It's disarming when you don't respond negatively towards someone who's responding negatively towards you, and instead have curiosity. The fine line is that I don't want anyone to be in a situation that's like unsafe always, but like, and you don't need to expose yourself. The Saturn and Pisces danger is that you're like constantly martyring yourself and overexposing yourself to like negative energy. But there can be some really powerful stuff that comes out of, especially with this Mercury retrograde in Sag and Gemini and Jupiter and Gemini, asking questions for especially people you don't agree with or who are acting cray cray. Like, questions are interesting.
Oh, absolutely. And you talked a little bit about the shadow side of Pluto in Aquarius, right? The sort of like way disconnected, like you're out. But I think maybe this is specific to air. The beautiful part aspect of air dealing with fire, right?
Yeah.
Is that when someone is, again, as long as they're not like being violent, right? But if someone's having their meltdown, they're a little aggressive, whatever it is, right? The beauty is, if you're coming from a place of intellect, you don't get embroiled, right? You're suddenly not taking offense, right? You're like, okay, I see you. I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to be still right now. You go do your thing, get it out, go maybe scream at the wall, go whatever. It's fine. And when you're ready to talk, you can come here. I'm going to be a safe space for you, a point of reason, because I'm not getting embroiled in your drama, which it's so tempting. They all want to bring you into the drama.
Yes. And it'll be really tempting right around New Year's. And I'm really curious for folks to think about. Yeah. I'm really curious for people to think about Halloween, because Halloween was a little bit of the week of Halloween was a little bit of a breadcrumb in terms of what's coming up. A lot of my clients have been like, "Oh, thank you for sharing that with me." Um, but New Year's Eve, New Year's January 1st, 2nd, 3rd, this is going to be a really potent moment of a test. That's where we don't get the glacial Pluto slow burn. It's actually a hot fire that kicks up right at the top of the year, in terms of how do we respond with curious. I love what you said about that's the positives of Aquarius is big picture, like curious big picture about a person's status instead of shutting you down, kicking you out. I don't want to deal with your emotional baby stuff. But also you made a really good point, which is like this is also a great time to be like, hey, I see you, which is Leo needs to see. That's the shadow. Oh my gosh, that's how we deal. That's the medicine, is like, I see you, and I have compassion for you, and I will also take some space while you have your process, but know that we can revisit this. Like, that's a very healthy way to deal with this energy. You can take space and also let a person know, I'm here to talk, when when the emotions are less at a 10.5, which they certainly will be at the top of the year, at the top of January. Yeah.
My survival tip is maybe nobody drink New Year's Eve. I'm just feeling like drinking, driving. I know we don't do those two things together anyway, but also separately, both of them seem like bad ideas.
I think you're absolutely correct about that. I don't drink, so this is super helpful for me, but I'm anticipating there being some like facing the music moments, or like the acknowledgement of the elephant in the room right around New Year's and it's going to be, again, with that Mars and Leo signature, it's going to feel deeply personal to people. It's just, I don't think that we're going to get through that portal between 2024 and 2025 without there being some truths coming to the surface that are deeply emotional, have to do with our pride, have to do with our sense of feeling seen, that are deeply historical and rooted in our childhood patterning, which is, again, I love this kind of work. I'm so Plutonian. Like, I have such a strong Pluto in my chart that I'm like, yes, let's do this work. But a lot of people don't want to do the work. So just know that, it'll be an interesting transition into the new year, and to be patient with people also. Another reason why to be patient, I think, is that this is the second of 3 oppositions. And the second opposition, from my perspective, it's also, I think, maybe an evolutionary perspective, is like the second opposition, or the second play in any planetary dynamic, is always like, you're not surprised anymore. You already know what the storyline is by the second opposition or the second aspect. Now it's a moment of grappling with really having to face the issue, and really having to get your hands dirty. The second, it's always like, got to get your hands dirty and change this. And then the third pass is happening in late April, and it's integration time. So I would say for people, if the top of the year is messy for you, or messy for the people you love in any way, or you just have a deep emotional childhood catharsis, because you do your empty chair and you have a deep catharsis, great, love it. By April, that's when you want to be looking back and saying, how have I grown? How have my relationships grown? How has my relationship to groups and people grown by April? That's a really good like checkpoint of like, this is how much I've integrated. Sometimes when I work with people, they're like, I have to integrate right now. And I'm like, no, actually, not necessarily. You can be messy at the top of the year, because it looks messy, you know?
Yeah, this is Pluto. This is slow. Devin makes a good point that we might also want to consider. There are comments. I don't know if you can see any of them,
I
but there are
can't see
some
the comments
comments.
at all, but yay, go. Tell
Yes.
me. I can't see them at all.
Devin points out that we might also want to consider the first Mars Pluto conjunction in Aquarius, which was February 14th of 2024.
Yes.
So that's a really good point.
Yes. February of last year was so important. So important. Like, just based on the fact that we had a lot of planets conjoining Pluto in Aquarius, right? So there was just a lot of, right? I think that was February of last year. There's a lot of
Yeah. I'm
portals.
like thinking back and I'm like, oh, that was a rough
Mercury. I think it was,
month.
Mercury. It was well, for anyone who's got, anyone who's got, well, I've got Aquarius in the eighth house, so I'm just like, well, okay. It's my stellium, but yeah, February of last year for anyone listening is thank you, Devin. It's an
Yeah.
extremely important month to look back, look through. I have a Google Calendar that's pretty fastidious. Virgo Pisces, okay, Virgo. I have a very fastidious Google Calendar, but if you have like you can look at your iPhone photos, you can look at your Google Calendar, your diary. February would be a really good month because yeah, there's some powerful seeds. And then I heard someone say this, and I need this to be fact checked because I'm like, I keep thinking this is not true, but another astrologer was saying that Pluto and Venus are conjoining in Aquarius for the first time, but didn't they conjoin last year in Aquarius? No, someone needs to fact check that.
Oh,
I
I'll
heard
fact check
someone
it
say,
right now.
yeah,
I'm like, I could do that.
yeah, but the reason why, regardless, Venus is going to be the first planet to talk to Pluto in Aquarius, um, the personal planets. So, and I think that that's happening.
Oh wait, hold on, because they're
Yeah,
going to do that. They're going to conjoin on December 7th,
good,
and
important news.
they also conjoined. You're correct in Feb. So what? Yeah, February 17th, 2024. Right, right,
Hmm.
right after the Mars Pluto conjunction, Venus conjoined Pluto.
Yeah, that's what I thought because Mars and Pluto were.
Oh, not sure what happened.
Oh, yes, that was the
Okay,
conjunction.
you're back. You were going out for a moment.
Yes, I know. I was like, oh my gosh, I lost her. So anyway, yeah, February of last year, really important, and
Oh, because
the
that was, remember, that was like everyone's like, oh, this is cute, Valentine's Day, and Mars opposite Pluto, Venus conjunct Pluto. Isn't that cute?
yes, exactly, yes, and so Venus is going to come in and do that again with Pluto first, and I would pay attention to December 7th. Actually, that's a really powerful moment for folks to just think about how they're healing their relationship to groups, systems, governments, networks, their friendships. I think I probably said friends already, but also how do we relate? Like, how do we relate to the big picture in a deeper way? How can we be more adult? I think in a deeper way. And by adult, that word is it can be so loaded, but it's like, how can we be a better citizen of the world? That's a really great
Mhm.
phrase for it. And I think Rick Levine talks about like act, act locally, think globally. And I think that's very Venus and Aquarius as well.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I put that in my notes. So we have um Venus conjoins Mars. No. Venus opposite
she opposes Mars.
opposes Mars on the
Yeah.
7th. And
Yep.
then what did I say? When was the conjunction? On
Uh,
oh, it's the same
oh,
day.
I heard the seventh. The seventh. Is it
Yeah,
the
it's the
same
7th.
day?
It's all the same day.
Oh, because
And
they're yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's the 7th. And then Mercury sextiles Venus before it goes direct on the 12th, which I thought is interesting. It feels like this Mercury retrograde is going to like that's maybe the tie-in. Maybe there is some sort of message Venus gets.
I to piggyback off that, this
Yeah.
retrograde initially is the double retrograde, triple retrograde. Let's count Jupiter in there. Let's not forget Jupiter. This retrograde mess that on the onset looks really, really messy, as we've discussed. I actually think by January, a lot of folks are going to look back. A lot of folks are going to look back and be like, wow, I'm really glad that that rat race went the way that it did because here's a few gems. Like I almost think that it's like the obstacle is the path for this retrograde. Like whatever is really, really triggering, annoying, frustrating, you have to do three times because of Gemini. You're like, wow, I'm doing this again. Like I have to do this over and over again. By January, that process was necessary is what I'm seeing, partially because of the mutual reception. That's also a thing. I'm like, oh, people are going to be happy about the results, but I don't think we're going to be happy until maybe like mid to late January. It might take a while before people are like, oh, okay, that worked out great.
You know, analogy here, a rock tumbler, right? So you take like a rock that's covered in just looks like an ugly piece of whatever, and you put it in this machine thing that just like grinds it with a bunch of other rocks and shit. Like it just does that and it's like painful. And you're like, oh my God, how does this work? And then you have this beautiful crystal.
Yes, it's good. Yeah, I love that. So because you're right, the tumbling around is very Gemini. The
Yeah.
tumbling, like, where am I? Who am I? I actually think for folks listening, like, if you feel a couple things. Like if you feel deeply existential this December, if you feel any form of internal gaslighting feels very Jupiter and Gemini to me. Because Jupiter and Gemini is constantly like, it's not logical, so it's wrong. It's not logical, so it's wrong. Logic doesn't necessarily engender happiness or presence. You know what I mean? Like, oh, go ahead.
I'm listening. I'm just grabbing a tissue really quick. So pardon me.
Yeah. There might be some internal gaslighting because of existential processes that happen during this time. It's a very existential moment because Mercury and Sag is rewriting our personal mythologies. So, like, our storylines about who we are changing, and other people are changing. We have to be curious. That's the best thing we could do. But it's going to be really easy to be judgmental, actually, of ourselves and others. It's going to be so easy to be judgmental because it's confusing. And when things are confusing, humans want, it's a natural response. Our bodies want things to be clear so that we know what to do, which is so Sag, by the way. Sag is like certainty, shooting forward. No shooting forward right now for the next month. Okay. I would say safely definitely the next 2 weeks. There's no bow and arrow, like, you know.
At the beginning of this, you said, okay, what'd you say? I'm trying to get it. You're going to like maybe come full circle, right? So what you think you know now, it's going to like be the opposite by the end of this, right? Which totally I agree with. But also because it's right, like Jupiter and Gemini opposite Mercury and Sag, there is this sort of backwards confusion. So I think like this chaotic confusion. So I think that in between now and then, don't be alarmed if you change your mind like 1,000 times. Like every piece of new information, you're like, but this is it, but this is it. And maybe that's a little bit where the craziness can come in because you're like, all these voices in my head.
Mm-hmm. Yes, all these voices in my head. And also other people who don't have a relationship to astrology or like any kind of archetypal like practice of understanding how archetypes are working in our life, and anyone anyone who's not working with these frameworks or with even like psychological frameworks, this cycle, I think a lot of folks are going to be they're going to double down on certainty because of the maelstrom, because of the storm. It's going to be like, nope, this is it. And I have had a really fun time personally and privately with a lot of folks who are doing that. Privately, I've been like looking at them being like, okay, we'll see. And it's kind of nice to be able to like witness people and not judge them for being certain, but being compassionate and being like, oh, they're trying to navigate this really crazy energy right now, this very like windstorm level energy, and they're doubling down. And this is what I think, this is a part of stoicism too, but it's like, you don't need to try to force anyone's opinions right now. Like just let them have that process, and I think the universe is going to untangle a lot of that without us doing anything. I don't feel like for a lot of folks, I'm like, I don't have to do anything. They're going to slowly be humbled over the next couple weeks because of this energy. It doesn't matter. I'm like, there's no way. I'll use an analogy. A few people I know, once Trump got elected, although again, because of this energy, I'm like, inauguration hasn't even happened yet. Okay, we don't need to dive into that, but I'm just like, we don't know what's going on. Any astrologer that's worth their salt that I've talked to is like, we really don't know. We really don't know how this is going to play out because it's so messy all the way up until late January. But a lot of people in my community have like said in the last week or so, Vivi, that they're leaving the country. Classic. Mercury retrograde in Sag. Like classic. It's so funny because unless they have Mercury retrograde in their chart, I believe them. But otherwise, if they don't have Mercury retrograde in their chart, I'm like, okay, we'll see. We'll see if you're moving. Because it's so retrograde. It's so like, I'm packing everything up. Oh, wait, never mind. I don't want to go, or I can't go, or like this is a reason why, or yes, I'm going to pack again. Like I can see people packing and unpacking their suitcases like 5 times this month.
And by the way, I'm not like laughing at the severity of the situation. I'm laughing at the retrograde moment, right? It's something that I think years ago, or at least said, and I think this applies to everything. It's like, don't break up with your partner on a Mercury retrograde. Just like don't, right? Like you're probably tempted to leave the country, to break up with your partner, all these things that could be valid, right? But like give yourself this time of reflection to think about it, make a plan, have the back and forth. And once Mercury's direct, then maybe tell your friends what you're doing, take action. Because right
Yes.
now, as you said, right, like I love this metaphor. Metaphorically, whatever it is, you're going to be packing and repacking your bag. So maybe save yourself the time and trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, it was hilarious. I had a client text me. Very few clients have my phone number, but this is like a VIP. I should say a very VIP client. They texted me literally the day after the Mercury station, Mercury retrograde station. Their partner's a Gemini sun. Okay, they text me and they go, "He broke up with me." And I'm very compassionate, and I just was like, well, tell me more. I'm very therapy. I'm very therapy.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm very gentle with my clients, but I was like, well, tell me more about the process. But my first private thought was, I was like, oh, really? He broke up with you on a Mercury station, and he's a Gemini sun. He's not thinking clearly. He has no idea what's going on. Also, you two aren't broken up. As much as you might think you're broken up, no, you're not broken up because he did it on a Mercury retrograde station. Okay. So,
Mhm.
okay, so you two are working something out over the retrograde. Great. That's the opportunity. It's just very funny how we get very without the archetypes, I think. This is why astrology I think is so important. Without the archetypes, we do the telenovela, which is he broke up with me, we're done. Ugh. And I'm like, actually, you're on a journey together because it's a retrograde. Trust me.
The question I might also ask is your Gemini sun boyfriend who broke up with you, when's the last time he broke up with you? Because I have a feeling that maybe this is a thing.
And you're absolutely, thank you. Oh, you're so good. This is what, okay, good astrologer here. This is a pattern in their relationship. Yes. Yes. The Gemini sun boyfriend has broken up multiple times because, again, Geminis, love you guys, can't always make up their minds.
And
And
then I
also,
would
when
ask you,
uncomfortable, will dip. Yeah.
yeah, and then
Yeah,
I
go
will
ahead.
ask you, what do you like about this back and forth? Because clearly you're sticking around for it.
Chiron. Well, this client has Chiron and Gemini, so there's a big, we're trying to work some stuff out. Oh yeah. Every time I see Chiron in the chart, I'm like, there it is. Yeah. Anyway, fascinating. Super, super fascinating moment. I think it's a really great time to be writing. That's what I would say. Writing, self-narrating, talking to yourself, but in positive neurolinguistic capacities, doing what you did. I think, Vivi, your example is so gold because it's like a behavior that I normally engage in when I feel triggered. I am now reverse engineering, or like I'm figuring out a completely different way to do this. Utilizing air is utilizing friendship. I mean, air is communication. So you're like communicating with another person. I tell a lot of my clients, like, you're not alone in this process. You do not have to be alone in the healing journey and in the emotional healing journey. You can literally call on friends and partners and family.
Take it from this Gemini moon. I get a handler for everything. If I'm writing something, like that's the other thing too, right? Like if I'm publishing something during Mercury retrograde, I mean, for me, this is something I do year round, but I have someone else edit it, right? Like
Yep.
you always just have the buffer of another person, which is nice. If you know you're that person who's going to have like a meltdown,
Yep.
maybe, talk to your empty chair or find a person you trust and say, like, I mean, I've had some moments so far where I've been like, I'm not thinking clearly. I'm just gonna like, I'm letting you know that I feel like I'm being a little emotional right now and like give people
So
warnings.
good. So good. What you just said is so good to work with Cranky Mars. Cranky
Yes.
Mars, actually a brave form. Oof, I love that you just brought that up. A brave form of Mars and Leo. Speaking of the brave Mars,
Yeah.
what is it like to be brave in your emotional vulnerability? Like that's actually a beautiful way to work with Mars retrograde in Leo, which is that hurt my feelings, or like my feelings are hurt by that action, or like I feel emotionally overwhelmed right now. Like literally saying it to people
Yeah.
is beautiful. And that's actually really nice because Mercury is going to be trining Mars at some point, maybe. I think,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. I think Mercury's going to be trining Mars ish. Well, at least they're whole sign trining right now in the
Mhm.
fire signs. So there's a lot of positive juju or energy between these two around like vocalizing and verbalizing your emotional vulnerability in a way that isn't mean or shutting it down. You are vulnerable. Like vulnerability is not shutting it down. Vulnerability is like, oh, this is where I'm at. I'm letting you see my heart, Mars and Leo, and my emotional process. I'm letting you see my inner child, or I'm letting you
Mhm.
see the inner the little kid on the playground that's inside of me. That's like maybe insecure. That's very Mars retrograde in Leo, I think, and Mars retrograde in Cancer in a lot of ways.
Oh my God, you can totally be like, I really feel, I mean, probably don't say this to somebody, but like, I feel like hitting you right now, but it's just because I'm afraid to be vulnerable.
Yes. I mean, yes, yeah, you exactly. Saying that to somebody is like, yes. But that's the archetype. That is the Martian archetype. Is like, instead of like, I'll say it this way, every act of violence is the tragic result of an unmet need. And so that is Mars retrograde, especially in Leo Cancer. Like, these two signs are like, I'm a little baby, my little baby hurts. And because my little baby hurts, this is like most men in contemporary Western culture, because my inner child and my emotional like process is so stunted or shoved down, I therefore act in ways that are socially acceptable, which are violent. That's part of what we're trying to do with Chiron and Aries. Like, we're trying to heal that wound, and Mars is the divine masculine. Like, we're trying to heal the wound. We're trying to heal that within each of us, regardless of gender identity. We're really trying to do this work right now. And this is a beautiful opportunity to do this work, this transit, this winter.
This has been such a good conversation. And I will say that I will publicly ask, can we do a part 2 for Mars and Cancer?
Oh, absolutely. I would love to do that.
Because I
This is
feel like we just hit on the Mars and Leo, but there's so much to unpack when we get to the other part of the story, which feels like a separate podcast episode.
Mars and Cancer. Yes, I won't say anything because we'll save it for the second. But my one little, I'll sneak this in, is just that, to me, Mars and Cancer, once we get Mars in a water sign, you and I can have a much deeper dive, spelunking into it. I think it gets even more psychological. It gets even more tender. It gets even more karmic, if we want to use a Vedic term. Like, it just, Mars and Cancer is it's a whole different bag of worms, and it's deep, deep.
And yes, and I'm going to end with saying, I think, to me, one of the good notes of, I mean, there's so many good opportunities we've discussed today, but I love that Mercury stations on the 15th, and then we have the opposition, right? The Mars Pluto opposition on January 2nd, which means once, Mercury is direct. So we are, even though whatever happens on the 2nd may be a lot to process, hopefully we will be in a different mindset, having gone through that Mercury retrograde, and in a place where we can handle it.
Yes. I'll just say one thing on that. December 15th to December 30th, we have 15 days, that second half of December, where downloads are going to be coming in that should be empowering. They should be empowering. They should be more like, oh, I now have a clearer idea of where I'm headed. I'm moving slowly still. I'm still moving slowly. I want to tell everybody that. Please move slow. Gemini Sagittarius is please move slow. But there should be some empowering downloads cognitively and communicatively that come in during that 15-day period before we get that second opposition that kind of kicks up. The one way that it could play out is that during the first 15 days of December, it's like confusion. A lot of stuff gets riled up in the snow globe of our lives. It's overwhelming. There's too much details. Then Mercury stations direct. The next 15 days, the snow globe is starting to sift. We're feeling empowered because we are starting to see. We're feeling empowered. But because we're empowered, our relationships are changing. Because all of a sudden, I'm able to, let's say that you and I are in a relationship, Vivi. I'm able to set a boundary with you because I feel empowered by clarity. And you're like, I'm upset about that boundary. Like, and that's totally normal. Like, that might be what happens at the top of the year, is some people feel empowered and emboldened by the clarity of the retrograde station or the direct station of Mercury. And then stuff comes up at the top of the year, which is good in the sense that it's part of the alchemical process of what Mars and Pluto are doing.
Ooh, I love that. And that's a great place to end. And I'll just kind of just plant the seed with you. I know they're different parts of the sky, but that also feels like the eclipses we've been having in the Aries Libra axis have been maybe in some way prepping us for this story.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, and I mean, like, just a side note, like Cancer Capricorn, that was the first opposition. So yeah, there's a cardinal seed. There's a lot about, Pluto squared the nodes in 2023. Like there was just a lot. Pluto's been in Capricorn, been haunting that that eclipse cycle. Okay, and we're not done with it yet. We still have that. I think we have an Aries solar eclipse in March, right? So we're not quite done with that story, but it is exactly that. Aries, the self, Libra, the relationship, boundaries, and how boundaries are changing. And it's going to bring up a lot for people relationally, but it's really good. It's really medicinal that we face that.
Oh, yes. And with that, it's a wrap, but you have things to promote. So tell me, so everyone stick around.
Yes, well, easy. My website, which you can find on my Instagram, actually, we're doing today. So Black Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 30% off all of my readings. It is the biggest. So I was doing 20% off for the last couple weeks, and now it's 30% off. This is the most affordable that folks can work with me going forward. It's never going to be this. It's never going to be this affordable again. So this weekend is a great time to book all kinds of readings. I do electional astrology. I do horary astrology. I do predict a lot of predictive work, and also birth chart readings. I love reading people's birth charts and talking about that. So 30% off. You can find the link in my Instagram. Or you can also email me, rexastrology@gmail.com, rexastrology. That's easy to just be like, what's the deal? And I can send you all that. If folks buy 3 readings, you get a 4th reading free, which is like such a steal. So good. So yeah, that's what I got going on. And I would love to work with folks. I'm excited to meet more people as we head into Pluto and Aquarius.
I love it. And also, just to point out, you are also very busy because you have a whole acting life and directing life, and you just did a play.
Yes.
So besides the fact that this is like Marvel affordable, I'm assuming Marvel gets busy. So
December's a great time. Yeah, I opened up my books in December. It's so funny. It's like it's so retrograde maelstrom because there's all these other things happening in my life. Even though it's like December's chill, it's my astrology month, and it's like, well, yes, but I did open my books. December's like I'm not going to be doing readings in January because I'm literally working all month, so on set. So December's a great time to work with me, and then I'll open my books up again, fingers crossed, in February. We'll see.
I love it. And for me, everyone, I do book readings, but I will just implore everything. I have one ask. Head over to my Substack, Art of the Zodiac. Please subscribe because if you are a paid subscriber, you get discounts, special invites, et cetera, but you help enable me to do my interviews. I have a lot of good ones on there, including a wonderful one with you. So everybody get a subscription to Art of the Zodiac, and that is my big ask. That would be my gift. That's my gift I ask for the world. So.
Yes. And also, y'all, I think subscribing to the Substack is so good. And just also keep an eye on Vivi because you are making moves in building like an astrology movement in Los Angeles, helping to build off of that. So I'm so excited for the work you're doing. Truly. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. And if you're part of my Substack, you'll get the first word about our upcoming Los Angeles Astrology Festival. So there's that.
Nice.
And with that, I'm going to go run off to look at apartments because that's what I'm doing on Black Friday. And have a gorgeous day.
Yes. Take care, everybody. Thank you for watching.
Bye.
Bye. See ya.